Preparing for PMP exam? Let's nail scope management in under 5 minutes. Well, we are definitely going to need more than 5 minutes, but let's see how it goes. Before we start with the scope management processes, there are three concepts that exam could have questions on. And also they will help you understand the scope management processes a little bit better. First is product scope. Product scope is nothing but the features, the functionalities that you're building. Project scope is the work that you and your team will be doing to build those features and functionalities. And scope creep is nothing but the uncontrolled changes that come along the way that require you and your team to do extra work. Remember, well, that's scope creep. Now we can get started with the scope management processes, and there are 6 of these and it's a lot to cover, so let's just brace ourselves and rush ourselves through. First is plan scope management. Plan scope management is nothing but the plan, the strategy, the approach that you will be following to define the scope of the project, to control the scope of the project, to validate the scope of the project. So it's just the work that you would be doing to define, control, validate. The scope goes into scope management plan. When you do this, there's another byproduct that comes out of it, just something called as requirement management plan, which is nothing but how you and your team are going to manage the incoming requirements, how you're going to prioritize them, how you're going to track them, how you're going to report them. So there's a difference between requirements management plan and scope management plan, and there could be some questions in the exam based on these. Post your scope management plan, what follows is collecting the requirements, right? So this is where you start collecting requirements. You gather all the stakeholders in one room. Not really. You gather all the stakeholders and you start gathering requirements through questionnaires, through interviews, through brainstorming discussions, through focus discussions, through benchmarking. And when you have all these ideas coming up, there are few decision making techniques that could be used to convert or qualify these ideas into requirements. First is unanimity, where there should be consensus across the board. Second is a majority, where more than 50% of the votes are needed to qualify an idea into a requirement. Plurality is where there is any idea that gets maximum number of votes. Fourth, autocratic, when someone just swoops in and takes a decision on behalf of all the stakeholders. So that's autocratic. And finally, there is multi-criteria decisions, where you have all these criterias like risks, time criticality, uncertainty, and your team, the stakeholders, they assign some numbers, they help you qualify an idea into a requirement. So once you have all these requirements, it's better to also visualize them. There could be some questions in the exam based on these. You gotta know these names. Well, first is affinity diagram. It's nothing but when you have a lot of ideas, how you can group these ideas. You can use post-its, and so that you can move these ideas freely across the wall. So that's affinity diagrams. Second is idea mind maps. Idea mind maps are again any approach that you use to come up to an idea. If there is any other idea where you use a similar approach, that means these two ideas can be clubbed together. Third is context diagrams, where obviously any feature that is being developed, there will be some user interaction. So clubbing the feature and the user interaction and forming a context together is something called as context diagram. Fourth is prototyping. Prototyping it would help the stakeholders because they would be able to see the functionality of the final product. And that would help them make an informed decision. So prototyping is another data visualization technique. Once you have all these requirements, right, what follows is you start defining the scope. Define the scope is nothing but writing down the scope statement. It essentially means what goes in the scope, what stays out, what are the acceptance criteria, and finally what will be the deliverables of the project. Deliverables could be obviously the final product, the documentations, test plan, dev documentations, project management plans, cost, schedule, things like that, all the deliverables. So after you define the scope, what follows is you start creating work breakdown structure. When you have this work written down in the scope statement, you start breaking down the work into individual work packages called through a technique called as decomposition. And uh, what comes out of it is a work breakdown structure with labels attached on them. The individual work packages don't have enough information in them for any team member to start working on them. So there's something called as work breakdown structure dictionary. You ought to know these terms. So work breakdown structure dictionary has all the details pertaining to the work package. So WS plus WS dictionary, both comprise of the scope baseline. So why scope baseline needed? Now it's going to help you compare, when you actually are working onto a project, you would be constantly monitoring, the actual work that is being produced with the scope baseline that was created, just so that you know if you're on track or if you're getting deviated. Once you define the scope, once you create the work breakdown structure and work breakdown structure dictionary, what follows is controlling the scope. Obviously, there will be some changes that will come along the way. And how would you know if there are some changes that need to be incorporated? So there are few tools that exam could have questions on. First is trend analysis. The second is variance analysis. Trend analysis is nothing but if you're doing worse or if you're doing better, that will help you understand if any corrective action needs to be taken. Second is variance analysis. So variance analysis is nothing but the difference, the variance between what is being produced to what was planned. So if there is a difference, there has to be some change to correct that difference. And obviously not all the changes can simply be accommodated. These changes again go through a perform integrated change control process, chaired by change control board, where enough information, the consequences of the changes are informed to the stakeholders, including the sponsors, where they can evaluate, assess, and only then the approved changes move forward. That's pretty much the control scope process is all about. What follows is validate scope. Okay, we are over 7 minutes. We have a minute to cover. Validate scope is nothing but, yeah, there's one more thing that I would like to call out. There is no correct order between validate scope and control scope. It need not be sequenced. Validate scope is nothing but where you again gather all the requirement stakeholders in one room. Not really. When you ask the stakeholders to validate, to inspect the deliverables, the interim deliverable, the final deliverable, as per the acceptance criteria, only when the deliverables meet the acceptance criteria, then they are shipped. If they are not, obviously corrective actions need to be taken, changes need to be incorporated, and only the approved changes through the perform integrated change control process chaired by the change control board goes into the scope, and now again the scope baseline gets updated. So there you have it. You have the validate scope process also covered in over a little 8 minutes. All right.